was in the 5th year of my Great Books program where I found myself blessed with the opportunity to take a history of science and mathematics course with Mr. Hendricks. That this really struck home for me. There I came to realize that what we call science today not only had its birth from the natural philosophy of the 1800s, but that philosophy was and is a valid and needed means of exploring the natural world. Following the great minds of science through their own words, from Aristotle to Archimedes, to Pascal, to Newton, to Einstein, one is able to see how they learned to ask the right questions and devise methods of answering them, the strong influence of culture upon the leading minds of the day, and how one must always be analyzing their motivations and methods of inquiry with just as much care as their data. I will forever be indebted to Mr. Hendricks and his Great Books program for fostering in me a lifelong passion for truth and beauty. In the words of Aristotle, therefore the activity of God, which surpasses all others in blessedness, must be contemplative, and if human activities, therefore, that which is most akin to this, must be most of the nature of happiness. Thank you.
In my 5th year of Great Books, I took a course on the history of science and mathematics. And one of the fascinating things I liked about that class was the Escher circles. How each circle was, each of these geometrical spheres and circles interwove together to create this beautiful piece of artistry. It was just quite fascinating just to see how the mathematics involved created beautiful artistry. Even in some of the Muslim art and architecture of the medieval period, is because they did not focus on images, because they believed that images were a violation of the Quran, they used mathematical and geometrical shapes for their art and architecture. And you can see the beauty in that. Just to be appreciative of the beauty of mathematics. It's simply astounding.
What I appreciated about history of mathematics and science was partly the personal aspect. So it was just, I think, 4 of us. So it was Alyssa and me, and then our friend Annabelle, and then Mr. Hendricks. And so it was just really fun to have that personal setting where we could discuss the lectures that we listened to and possibly the reading that we had done that week. And so it was a really comfortable environment for us to really kind of grapple with things and ask questions and maybe ask an awkward question about something scientific that we didn't understand. And so one fun aspect of that was that we were able to each take turns preparing a paper, and that kind of helped us get into the material a little bit better and kind of come to grips with what we were focusing on that week. And it was a great way to try and figure out how to put these ideas that we were learning into something kind of quicker than a normal GBT paper. So in a lot of ways it helped me later on in college. But it was also just a way to kind of get the ball rolling at the beginning of the discussion. As to how science kind of complemented GBT, well, it was fun because we started out with the ancients, and so we got to look at Aristotle again, but this time we got to look at him and ask scientific questions rather than just kind of philosophical questions. So we kind of got to put those together. And then when we did Galileo, we got to kind of look at and Darwin, we kind of got to look at, oh wow, this is the scientific debate going on as well as what was going on theologically. So when we got into the Enlightenment and looking at the deists and kind of the more move away from God's work and being kind of a personal presence in people's lives and in the theology, he kind of became more distant, and that was kind of coming along with the scientific move at the time. And it was really fascinating being able to see that connection of, oh wow, this is what's going on with Darwin and even earlier with Galileo, and the move that science was making in tension with theology and just kind of the Christian thought at the time. So that was fascinating, kind of be able to look at some of the authors who were in GBT and see it from a different angle. And I think Darwin is not in the curriculum, is he? So that was fun to be able to do some extra read. Like Galileo was fun because his book was very influential at the time that he wrote.
Well, actually the history of science that I took with Mr. Hendricks was what inspired me, got me interested in philosophy of science, which is a course that I actually took at Oxford while I was there. In history of science, we did a lot of kind of a comprehensive survey of thought from the pre-Socratic philosophers and Ptolemy, and went all the way through up to Einstein. But in philosophy of science, what I actually did was look more at the more contemporary philosophy, but I would have been completely lost if I didn't have the background of the history of science. I already knew when they would mention Lamarck or Linnaeus or Copernicus. I knew what they were talking about. I knew I had a context for the conversations that were going on. That was so helpful, and more than anything, I think it gave me a curiosity about that part of the world, because I'm kind of an English history, humanities person, and I think history of science made me realize I can't be a humanities person unless I also understand the science, because it's all a part of it. It is. They're all connected and you can't untangle them. The people writing English and history have this context behind them, so it's all connected. So it made me curious, and even now I'm continuing after taking that course last semester. I'm thinking, how can I try to think about science? And it's so much of how I look at the world, all of the layers behind things, and do I look at that tree or that animal as something that is trying to survive and there's a struggle for existence, or do I see it as something beautiful displaying God's glory? And how do I look at things? It changes my perspective of the world, and that's what I think Darwin did so much, was he totally changed the way that we look at the world. And when you do the history of science, you get to see what it was like before that, how the world was a pageant. It was a display. It was a march of God's glory, and they saw what they looked for is what they saw, and what we're looking for in the world is now what we see. We see struggle, we see death, we see pain, and that's what we find in the world. And before it was, they were looking at the connection between the angels and invisible things in the universe, and they were moving things, and history of science was so helpful. And we also, in the history of science, we wrote papers. We would switch off writing papers on the material that we'd read or listened to in the lectures that week. And that was very helpful because it helped me to think through what I was reading, especially since science comes more difficultly to me. So I was able to really think through my thoughts, and that helped me a lot when I went to Oxford. It was very, very technical language, and a lot of that helped me. And the ideas really prepared me. A lot of the ideas in GBT, it's also connected. If I read Hume and GBT, that was a huge discussion in some of my philosophy of science. In science, they're still struggling with the pull of inductive reasoning. How much can we know about the world? Can we look up and make up the sum of all the things that we know and say that this is the way the world works? Or can we not make that jump? Can we not say, all the swans that I see are white, so therefore all swans are white? That's inductive reasoning, and that's what Hume saw a problem in, and it's still something that scientists are struggling with. They don't know, is this the way the world actually is, or are we just putting that on the world? And that's huge in science. They're struggling to find something to hold on to not say, this is the way the world is. So that was huge in helping me understand that. And when I went to my tutorial, and he was like, have you read Hume? Do you know what's going on? I could say, yes, I do, because I've read that already. Not that I understand him completely, but I had a context for the conversation. So that was really helpful.